Alright, as has become the norm on my channel, I'm going to start this review with a disclaimer. I think knowing what I like and dislike before watching this review is important because it will give you valuable context and explain why I feel the way I do about Boltgun. Okay, so here's the disclaimer. I don't love Wolfenstein or Doom or Duke Nukem or Quake or any of the OG first-person shooters. They were all around when I was growing up and I've played most of them, but old school shooters just aren't my thing. The original Doom is okay, I guess, it's fun, but it's really basic. All you have to do is kill bad guys and find keys. It doesn't have much of a story or variety in its mission design, and I find that playing these types of games for anything more than 10 to 15 minutes gets boring fast. Why is this important? Well, Warhammer 40K Boltgun is a throwback to these types of shooters, and it's all of the things I've just mentioned. The story is light and the gameplay is incredibly straightforward. You just have to kill bad guys and find keys. There are no skill trees, no progression systems, no custom loadout options, no stealth mechanics, no vehicle sections, you get the point. So you're probably thinking, I must think it's kind of meh. Turns out I love it. Boltgun's core gameplay might be basic, but it's so polished, so refined, and so addictive that I couldn't put it down. The best part is that you don't even need to be a 40k fan to enjoy it. I like the 40k universe, but I don't know all that much about it. That didn't stop this from being one of the best games I've played in 2023. Boltgun is set several years after the events of Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine. Yeah, that action game from 2011, link to my review in the description. It's not a sequel though, its connection to that game is fairly loose, this is more like a spin-off. The story is centered around Malum Cato, a Space Marine from the Ultramarines chapter, like Captain Titus from the 2011 game. He's been sent to Graia, the Forge world again from the 2011 game, to rid the planet of another chaos-related incident. This time the tech priests were playing around with a power source, yes, the same one from the 2011 game, and their experiments have opened up a warp rift and all kinds of nasties need to be purged. Now, I'm hoping that I've got all the terminology and pronunciations correct here. Apologies to any 40k aficionados if I haven't, this isn't my area of expertise. The story is mainly told through brief text summaries shown at the beginning of each mission. There are a handful of cutscenes spread throughout the game, although if a narrative-focused experience is what you're gagging for, then Boltgun will leave you incredibly disappointed. Let's be honest though, this isn't why you're here. You're here for some fast-paced, bloody action, and this is where it delivers in spades. What I think it does so well, particularly with the arena battles, is cadence. When you get into the flow of dodging projectiles, taking out enemies and using the chainsword to move swiftly around the environment, it feels almost rhythmical. The combat can be equally enjoyable simply standing still though. Pulling out the heavy bolter and laying waste to everything in your path is often a viable strategy too. There isn't a ton of enemy variety, but they all require different strategies and weapons to deal with, and you're generally pitted against a combination of them to keep you on your toes. The standard weapon, the Boltgun, is useful in most situations, but enemy type and scenario will have a huge influence on what the right weapon to use is. The shotgun, for example, is best suited to up close or corridors where enemies can suddenly appear from around corners. It knocks enemies backwards too, so it can also be handy to get someone off your face or knock them off a ledge. The plasma gun, on the other hand, deals big damage, but it's slow firing, making it unsuited to fast moving targets, and the splash damage, which can hurt you too, limits its use up close. Then there are the heavy weapons. The Vengeance Launcher, Volkite Caliber, Melter Gun, and Grav Cannon are all powerhouses, and are best saved for the heavies or bosses. Again, apologies for any bad pronunciations. They all have their strengths and weaknesses, meaning that you'll need to experiment to find what works best for each encounter. Weapons can be upgraded too by finding spirit upgrades hidden in each level. These change the properties differently depending on the gun and are definitely worth hunting down. New weapons are introduced just at the moment you feel like they're needed, and all 8 of them are viable. They look fantastic and they sound incredible too. Now, a lot of reviews have complained that the AI isn't good, and for sure there are some situations where you can easily cheese enemies. I'd argue that this is rarely an issue though. The difficulty in these games doesn't come from crafty enemies using advanced tactics to outsmart you. The difficulty comes from the sheer number and variety of enemies you have to deal with at the same time. Prioritizing the dangerous targets amongst the hailstorm of fire from smaller grunts takes skill, and getting overwhelmed is easy. The goal here is to use your superior mobility to your advantage to avoid projectiles and seek out ammo, armor, and health pickups. Levels are labyrinth-like, and some of them are massive. There's no map either. I'm pretty good at orienting myself without needing one, but there were a couple of times where I found myself properly turned around. Some of the levels have been deliberately designed to fuck with you too, and if you don't have a good sense of direction, you might find the second half of this game frustrating as hell. It feels like the intention here is for levels to be solved like a puzzle. I honestly can't see anyone getting much satisfaction by simply finding their way out of a level though, and I think the biggest reason that people won't finish this game will be due to getting lost. Each level has a number of secrets to find which contain various power-ups. Most of them aren't that difficult to locate, although in arena situations it can be a challenge to see them when you're frantically jumping around trying to avoid getting shot. I played through on hard, which really wasn't that difficult except for some of the arena battles. Most levels have at least one section that turns into an arena that needs to be beaten before you can progress. It's usually pretty easy to predict when this is about to happen because you'll pass through a room or corridor full of items. I'm not great at FPS games, my old COD videos attest to that. Even still, I think the hardest setting would have been a better choice because the sections in between the arenas don't require much skill. If you're not completely hopeless at these types of games, I'd recommend choosing hard, and if you're halfway decent, go for Exterminatus. Now, there are some sections about halfway through the game that have an absurd difficulty spike. Unfortunately, you can't change the difficulty once it's set. If you want to make it harder or easier, you'll need to start a new game, which definitely sucks. The only other thing which Boltgun doesn't do that I would have liked is some old school multiplayer. Even if it only had a basic deathmatch style mode, that would have been enough. Hell, I'd even settle for a split screen local option. Maybe that's something that can be added in later on, but the developer has said that it was planned as a single player experience, so I wouldn't count on it. So obviously the presentation is an homage to games like Duke Nukem 3D and Doom. The world is fully 3D, but enemies are two-dimensional sprites that rotate on the spot so that they always face you. For the most part, I totally forgot that they were 2D, except for the occasions where you see enemies from directly above and they look like someone fucked up in Photoshop. Your weapons are also 2D and everything is animated with an authentically low number of frames. In the visual settings, you can actually increase or decrease the amount of retroness. So if for some reason you don't like the heavily pixelated look, you can make everything look a bit sharper. Conversely, you can make it look even more pixelated, as if it was running on a 386 on low settings. There are some modern conveniences too. There's an accessibility section in the settings that lets you make the game a bit more comfortable, such as turning off head bobbing while moving. You can also unlock all levels, so if you get stuck, you can skip to the next one. Something that I found really useful that you might want to do too is make the Servo Skull's messages stay on the screen longer before they disappear. This is a great sounding game too. I've already talked about the weapons, but the music is suitably retro as well. I've watched a bunch of reviews that chose to play non-game music in the background, like banging metal tracks. The two go together well for sure, but outside of the menus, that's not what you'll actually be listening to when you play it. This is just something to be aware of if you've seen other reviews. As far as performance goes, I've heard that on PC there can be drops in the frame rate when there are loads of enemies on the screen. I played through on the PS5 and I never noticed any slowdown. The screen can be completely blanketed in enemies, projectiles and chunks of flesh, and it maintains a solid 60. Now, I don't have any way to accurately test the frame rate, so I can't say with 100% certainty that there aren't dips, but if there are, they aren't big. Additionally, I didn't encounter a single bug or glitch either. Okay, so Boltgun isn't as ambitious as something like Cyberpunk, but I still think this counts for something. Playing a game that feels this polished just elevates an already stellar package. Okay, so who do I recommend Boltgun to? I don't think you need to have grown up in the 90s or love quote-unquote boomer shooters to enjoy it. You don't need to be a Warhammer 40K enthusiast either, although obviously that won't hurt. If you like fast-paced shooters with a bit of flair, this should hit the spot. If you're after some juicy 40k lore or an accessible entry point into Warhammer, then this isn't that. And this is my biggest criticism. Both this and 2011's Space Marine are great games that unfortunately don't do much with the rich universe of 40k beyond using the cool aesthetic. If you're a fan of 40k, then I'm sure there's plenty of fan service here, but for the average punter, it's simply window dressing. Now, would Boltgun be as compelling if it was skinned with a Barbie theme? I guess there might be a market for that, but ultimately I don't think so. A large part of this game's appeal is the grimdark setting. I'm hoping that maybe Space Marine 2 will go all in on 40k lore, but until then, this serves as a fantastic appetizer. It's given me a new appreciation of classic first-person shooters, and even got me playing through the Doom games. If you want to know if it plays as good as it looks, then the answer is yes.